Thank you everyone for joining. We've been invited here from the Sudbury East Chamber of Commerce to speak to and also give a little bit more information about what's going on with employment, the Employment Standards Act, and what other changes have been made that you need to be aware of with your small business or medium-sized business when you're opening up again for COVID. Now, I know there's been a little bit of confusion with opening and closing, and it's been very frustrating for everyone. But at this time, it's a really great opportunity just to be able to go through, make sure that your business is fully protected and operating within what the employment laws are looking for at this time. So just our fun little legal disclaimer, and just wanted to let you know that we are going to be going over some of the Employment Standard Act as well as the Occupational Health and Safety Act. The legislation will provide some minimums, but if you have stated in your contracts greater rights for the employees, or if you don't have contracts in place and you are falling under common law, it will change things. So these are all good things to kind of keep in mind as we speak about this, because it is extremely important to have documentation in place. A lot of businesses that we meet with either have outdated documentation or none at all. So just bear that in mind, and we are happy to have one-on-one conferences at no charge for chamber members as well, just to go over your unique situation with your business so that you can have answers to more specific questions in regards to how these laws affect you. The Reopening Ontario Act is a flexible response to COVID-19. It has been changing as the pandemic has been evolving. So the information that we're sharing today is based on what's available today. This presentation also does not give legal advice and is not intended to replace anything written in legislation. What we're going to go over today is what you need to know for health and safety, what you need to know for HR, recent changes to the Employment Standard Act, and a few frequently asked questions that are going to just give you a little bit of insight to some of the things that some other businesses are going through, and probably things that are on your mind as well. I will also review with you our EasyHR programs and what the benefits to chamber members are, and what the next steps are as well. So without further ado, what you need to know for health and safety. So the Occupational Safety Act at this time does place a responsibility on everybody in the workplace. The primary responsibility does fall on the shoulders of the employer. So it's very important to know what requirements you need to have in place for your business, not just in relation to COVID, but also in relation to the general law. And when you have five or more workers at your location, you are required to have a written health and safety policy. Also, you are required to have things like your workplace violence and harassment policy. When you get to 20 or more employees, you start having to go down the road of joint health and safety committees. So there's a lot of different things that need to be in place. We're definitely here to help you navigate those waters. But in regards to COVID-19 for health and safety right now, some of the very important things to keep in mind, I'm sure everyone's heard about physical distancing and how important that is to stop the spread of the disease. Now, being out in public, that's one thing. Having it at your business is another. And how do you limit the amount of people working in one space? There are different ways to do that. Some of the more practical ways are staggering start and break times. Also to installing barriers, partitions, all those sorts of things. But depending on the industry that you're in, there may be additional actions that you need to take in order to limit the contact between workers. So again, very important to be researching these things, or if you reach out to us, we can definitely help you with that as well. As part of hand hygiene, and I know, again, everyone's been hearing this, how important it is to wash your hands, cough and sneeze into your sleeve, wash your hands afterwards. A big part of keeping this top of mind for employee is placing posters around the workplace, both in the bathrooms and break rooms, just constant reminders to keep it top of mind, because this is, even though it's been around for a year now, it is something that some people are still adjusting to, and having those reminders there visible really does make a big difference. If you do have a worker there who has tested positive for COVID, it's very important to have in place policies. So in your employee handbook, generally is where most of your HR policies are going to be housed. And it's extremely important to have these all in place to basically have an even playing field for all of your employees, as well as let them know what's going on in the business, what your business policies are, what the expectations are, and also to ensure that, heaven forbid, if anything ever goes to a Ministry of Labor case or a lawsuit or something like that, that you have that backing there in place. This is one of the most important things for small to medium-sized businesses, is having your documentation there correctly. So of course, having a COVID policy, step-by-step plans on what to do with a confirmed place is very important to have in writing. And the employee, of course, must notify the employer of taking a leave for that as well. There is an unpaid job protected leave, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail later on. So it's important to have a hierarchy of hazard controls as well, and who's taking care of that? What kind of PPE do you have? What sort of things are you putting in place at your business to keep it as safe as possible? And how are you communicating that message to your employees? For human resources, this is where the Employment Standard Act is coming into place. And the Employment Standard Act has a set of rules and guidelines in place for basically establishing things like what minimum wages are and what rights employees have. Going back to the documentation again, and why it's so important to have this in place and up to date, is that when you are using documentation that supports the Employment Standard Act minimums and that points back to them, you are able to use those minimums. We often see small businesses that don't have employment contracts in place trying to use those minimums, and that's where they can get in a little bit of hot water. So extremely important to have your contracts up to date and having things like layoff clauses in there, having the proper paperwork for if you do have to have a layoff for COVID reasons, that you are identifying the time frame that that employee will be laid off for, and the reason. If it's COVID related, having points that state back to that. Now, returning to work as well is something that you are required to, as a best practice, certainly to have that kind of documentation in place. So things like a welcome back package, having a timeline, reaching out to that employee ahead of time. If things have progressed with the business's ways of operating, is there training in place for it? Notice periods, if something's happened to someone or they're taking care of sick relatives or something like that, what kind of accommodations do you have in place, and having that in writing as well. Job abandonment is something that businesses face, and there are steps that you need to take in order to protect your business. One of those is during a return to work, if you haven't heard from the employee and they're not showing up on their set start date. What do you do at that point? There is a paper trail that should be followed. We do have best practices for those kinds of situations where you are reaching out to the employee through different media, and ensuring that you've got the correct letters in place for job abandonment. Some of the recent changes to the Employment Standard Act. So I'm sure everyone's been reading the news. There's been so much changing just with the way that you're even allowed to operate your business during COVID, and it's definitely impacted us all. There has been a lot of change with legislation going on over the last year as well. The biggest ones that are going to be affecting you are most likely the new infectious disease emergency leave. So this is related to people that are in a position where they can't work due to COVID. It is an unpaid leave, and it is something that you can't punish an employee for taking. So you can't have any kind of negative reaction to this. This is something that they are entitled to. The other one is a layoff period exemption. So this changes a little bit with the way documentation has always worked with layoffs. The exemptions, the dates have been changing. They are still subject to be changed. But right now, currently, we're running from March the 1st, 2020, all the way through to July 3rd, 2021. And that's definitely one of those, stay tuned, because it may be changing again in the future. For termination, severance, and constructive dismissal, application changes are there in certain cases. And again, this is all very case by case, but something definitely to be aware of. And of course, minimum wage has increased to $14.25. Now, some of the frequently asked questions that we have, and these are coming from businesses, probably much like yours, where they've run into these kind of situations, or it may be something that you're facing in the future. One of them that has come in is, can an employee be fired for refusing to return to work due to COVID-19 health concerns? So in this kind of a scenario, the workplace has reopened and the employer requests that the employee returns to work. Due to COVID-19, the employee has to take care of their child because the daycares are closed, all of those kinds of things. So the Employment Standard Act states on that the employer can require the employee to return to work unless the employee has a right to a job protected leave, which again, there are several of those. And you do have to ensure that if it is a proper leave that that employee is entitled to, that there can be no punishment and that they are able to take it. The employer also has the ability to set the employee's work schedule. For their employee, there are a number of unpaid job protected leaves, including the infectious disease emergency leave. So again, things that you should be aware of, and that, you know, in those times, think of who you're turning to. We're definitely here to give you advice, but you want to ensure that you are following what those leaves entail. And the next question, so what happens if an employee fails to notify an employer that they will be taking the infectious disease emergency leave? So in this kind of a scenario, a workplace is reopened. An employee takes the infectious disease emergency leave. The employee has not notified the employer. So frustrating situation. I'm sure a lot of us have been there before, where you just haven't heard back from that employee and you're just not sure what to do. So in this kind of a case, the Employment Standard Act says that on the employer side, an employee is required to tell the employer in advance before starting a leave, if it's not feasible for some reason, as soon as possible after starting the leave. So a little vague in terms of time, but think of an emergency kind of a situation where they wouldn't be able to, such as being in the hospital, something like that. There is a little bit of room for that to not happen in advance. The employee does not lose the right to take the leave if they fail to notify the employer. The employee should be advising the employer, either written or orally, that they will be taking the leave before they start the leave. If advance notice can't be provided, the employee must inform the employer as soon as possible. So these are where these situations start coming into a little bit of gray areas. This is where EasyHR as a team, we really help to be able to provide you these kinds of answers in case-by-case scenarios and kind of make a little bit more sense of all of those gray areas so that your business is protected. Another question we've been seeing come through a lot is, can I make it mandatory for my employees to get a COVID vaccine? Now, I know at this time it's not feasible for everybody in normal situations to get that COVID-19 vaccine, as there are some delays with the rollouts. But, you know, looking to the future, is that something that you can do? It's not an easy answer. It's best to say mostly yes. But again, it's going back to your policies. Do you have a policy for the vaccination and having that in place in writing? Also, too, we do have to be careful not to infringe on the employee's human rights. We don't want to cause any human rights violations. So if this is going against their religious beliefs, or if they have an illness or something like that, that would be a reason for them not getting the vaccine. We do have to be very aware of that. Of course, some businesses, this is going to be a little bit more acceptable than in others as well, because some businesses are dealing with the public closely, or they're in a situation where you know, the employees are very close to each other in working proximity. So those are the kind of things you'd want to think about as well before deciding whether or not to make that mandatory for your business.
They also, sorry, Kim, I just want to add something there, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely.
I noticed, I attended a few public health presentations, and they were also talking about, with the COVID-19 making it mandatory, it needs to also make sense. Like if if it's a high transmission kind of workplace, then there's
Mhm.
a high chance that you can put this mandatory. But as you mentioned before, it needs to be, you can't be infringing on people's human rights. But within certain industries, so for example, in healthcare, they may be able to have that as a prerequisite. Obviously, it's still very new. It's a new kind of situation. So there's going to be constant change. There's going to be a lot of updates coming in the next few months, years with this. And then in terms of human rights, employment standards, and as well as health and safety. So though this is what information we have right now, it can definitely change. There's a lot of changes constantly happening right now. And even with all these accommodations you have to do, obviously there is a limit in terms of how much accommodations employers can do when it comes to COVID-19, people being sick, going on these leaves. As long as it doesn't go to the level of undue hardship, obviously you want to make that accommodation, but there is to an extent a level of accommodation that an employer would be able to do. And then at that point, they can potentially go into undue hardship, go the route of termination kind of thing. But that one's a little bit more complicated. And that's where you definitely want to get some legal advice or some sort of HR support on those kind of conversations. Right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. And again, it's so important to think too, as a business owner, who are you going to for this kind of advice? Who are you going to for this kind of support? I know speaking with different people, sometimes just like you had mentioned, Mark, it's their employment lawyer. For some businesses that gets expensive quickly. So then you're looking at the HR support kind of options as well. But it is important to be up to date on this advice because it is constantly changing at this point in time. So just kind of getting a little bit more about EasyHR, what it is, what we do. Mark and I are both part of the team. We specialize in human resources support. So for small to medium-sized businesses, we typically take over either supporting the role of your HR manager if you have someone in-house that does that, or we can help you to be that voice and to be there for you. Part of what we do is customized, excuse me, documentation packages. What they include are all of the things that you need in order to be running your business safely, such as your employment contracts, your offer letters, your employee handbooks with all of your business policies, termination letters, all of those things that you need to have in place for your HR packages. We also give unlimited advice, and I'm sure you can see already through how we're letting you know that everything is changing so quickly. Before COVID came around, it was tricky to navigate the waters of the Employment Standard Act, because there are some areas that, sometimes when you read them, it seems like it's really gray and you're not sure which way to make a decision and what to do. And of course, you're trying to do the right thing so that it doesn't come back. That's where we come into play. We can offer that unlimited advice. We're actually partnered with a lawyer. So if it gets to the point where you need to have legal advice, we have access to that as well for you. We do one-on-one consultations. For chamber members, we do this at no charge, where you can meet with us. And typically we take anywhere from half an hour to an hour to go through with you, what are your business needs right now? How is your business set up? What's in place? What kind of gaps do you have where you're open to liabilities? What do you have in place for COVID? Is it up to date? And we can answer all of your questions, because if you're looking at the frequently asked ones and thinking, I've got a pressing one that's just not on that list, please reach out to us. For chamber members, again, no charge to do that. We also change documentation. So as legislation changes, as your needs and the way that you operate as a business change, we make those changes to reflect that, so that you've got everything up to date all of the time. We also, for the health and safety side of things, offer a program for that, where we do have the customized documentation, again, having things like your health and safety policies, having your workplace violence and harassment policies, all of the fun health and safety stuff that we all have to do by law. But, a lot of times as a business owner, we're wearing a lot of hats, and it's difficult to be able to put these in place and to make sure that they're up to date and written in concise and clear language that your employees can understand as well. We also give unlimited advice, and we've been very busy with that lately with COVID, of course. A lot of people having a lot of questions about what PPE they need to have in place, what posters do they need to have in place. We help you set all of this up. We help you with your health and safety boards. We do one-on-one consultations, again, to answer all of your questions. We help you by sending you the links to all of the mandatory trainings and postings that you need to have, as well as doing virtual site visits, because not every business is the same. And sometimes there are little infractions that you have that we see very consistently across different businesses that we can help you to clean up and keep in line with what's required to be done. In addition to that, we have a lot of different services because our main focus is, again, these small to medium-sized businesses. What do you need help with? Are you having issues with recruiting? Do you find when you're hiring candidates that, you're making what you believe is the right choice for a candidate, but they never seem to work out? And how do you get access to that top talent? We do interviews, we do background checks, all sorts of things. And we do it on every level so that, if it's someone that you're looking to have just as a part-timer, we can help you out with that. If you need to replace your CEO, we can help you with that as well. So we do have multiple levels that we do for that. We can also help with onboarding processes, procedures, payroll systems, support, employee hearing tests for manufacturers and factories, as well as for people that need more help. Do you need on-site support? Do you need someone who's a dedicated employee working for you to manage your HR 5 to 10 hours a week? Those are all of the kind of things that we help with. The additional services are priced separately, and they are based on your needs. So we're not charging a large price that, is a one size fits all. We go by what you need, what's most important to you. But just as an example, for chamber members on a 1-year program and somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 10 employees, to do an HR program where you've got all of those things in place, normally a documentation package like that, you're looking anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 if you were to go to your lawyer for it. We offer this for the chamber members at $249 a month plus tax. If you're doing just health and safety, we offer it at $199 plus tax per month. If you want to do them both, we make the price even better. We do it for $349 per month. For some businesses as well, we know times are tough and things haven't been as easy with the doors closed, but it's a good time to get your documentation done. If you're in this kind of a position and you're thinking, you know what, this sounds like me, this sounds like something that I need a lot of help with to get things up to date, but I don't necessarily know when my business is going to be opened or what things are going to look like in the next year or so, we offer the documentation only packages. Again, we do these at the prices for the chamber members that are hugely discounted. For the HR package, which includes your employment contracts, handbooks, offer letters, contract agreements, the termination letters, full and final release, your job abandonment letters, again, very important if people are taking leaves or laid off and not showing up again, as well as layoff agreements. So we walk through this with you. It's all tailored for your company. $9.99 plus HST. We can even take this over up to 6-month payments if that's more comfortable for you. For the occupational health and safety, again, we do the policy book for that. We take care of your COVID-19 policies, have a copy of the Green Book for you, as well as your workplace violence and harassment policies, all of your posters that you need to have up there, as well as we can send you those training links. So we take care of all of those things. Again, if you do health and safety documentation on its own, $9.99 for that one-time fee, or you can combine them for $14.99. So just to kind of give you an idea of the kind of services that we offer here and the pricing for the members, that's a lot of it there. So for next steps, we do free consultations. If this sounds like it's something that would benefit your business, or if you have more questions, there's no obligation to buy, but we're here to help for that. We do free consultations. We also can give you a free COVID policy guide, and that's part of our consultation service. There's absolutely no charge for you. So just coming to a consultation with us, you will get that policy guide. And I have left my contact information on here. And I believe that if there's anything that we can help you with, we're going to do our absolute best to get those answers for you and make sure that you're protected and you're comfortable and confident going into business, reopening again when things are ready to open, and be in control of what's happening for you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kim. Really appreciate you taking the time and giving us such useful information for the Sudbury East Chamber and our members.
Thank you so much, Laura, for inviting us.